Do you have any funny stories about either one of these players, Nate?
I mean, outside of looking at Drogo's Twitter, I mean, when we go to events and stuff, these are two of the funnier guys. I mean, Harstem's always like, his presence in a room is always felt, you know. He's got like a bright personality, I guess, probably like the way to say it. Like he's a funny guy. He's tall, he stands out. I don't know that there's anything that really jumps out. I really like when they were doing the whole thing with the captain's hat at Home Story Cup, I guess. That's the first thing that comes to mind, at least.
I always feel Harstem is a guy that's incredibly hard to dislike. Like, even if you tried, you like just sat there and tried your hardest to dislike him, you just couldn't, you know? Like,
No.
he's that kind of fella. And Drogo, he's still really young, by the way. I think Drogo's like in his early 20s, like very early 20s. But yeah, he's come a long way. I remember like him smashing deaths and stuff, very, very passionate. But yeah, he's kind of like channeled into something else a little bit recently, like more into the fun kind of thing. I know he's delved into those, I don't want to say MMO kind of games, but definitely unusual kind of games. Was big in the Magic community for a little bit with his memes. But when it comes down to StarCraft 2, both these guys handled the game in a very different way. Like, I remember speaking to Harstem one time about Drogo, and he was like, yeah, sometimes Drogo just wins. And when I talked to him about the game, he has a very set system about how he approaches it. Like, you know how you can go down a tree diagram where it's like, okay, if he does this, I go with this route. And if he does this again, I go with this route. Like, very, very systematic. So trying to copy Drogo is incredibly difficult because Drogo has this entire formula mapped out in his head for every step of the way. And Harstem was very much like, very respectful when he was talking about Drogo just being a great thinker when it comes to the game.
Yeah, he's definitely one of those smart players that kind of throws out those interesting things. And I think that, you know, even in his humor, right, we kind of see the intelligence of like the things that he's looking for, the things that he's bringing up. Unsurprisingly, both players kind of like toss some pylons out on the map in case the other player just went straight to their main for the scout, maybe trying to make him think it could be a proxy, or maybe if they weren't seen going for the actual proxy. But Nexus expands with both, and we do have a good amount of adepts on the field for Drogo, which, as we know, two of them can one shot. They're always going to be trying to threaten to get inside of that main base. That's why you usually keep the probe there to try and get a block off. Like, boom, right there. You get that shield battery. It takes forever to build, so you have more time to cancel it if you need to.
Do you know what I kind of like about this particular situation as well? Oh, that gateway wasn't entirely...
Wow.
It wasn't entirely blocking it off, was it? So we had to build another pylon there, which that's kind of funny. But the units that they've made so far, so Harstem went for 2 Stalkers, then like a Stalker Sentry, and Drogo went for 4 Adepts in a row kind of thing. That is exactly what I thought I would see from both of these guys. Harstem opting for the more, I'm going to play more defensive and then scout and react, and Drogo being the one, I'm in your face.
Yeah, I definitely would say that I would usually categorize Harstem as a player that I know for like he's very, very much so about those good macro games, maybe mixing a timing or two, but Drogo certainly, I think, understands that his strength here may lie in his ability to be aggressive. Now, Stalkers do outrange the Adepts. Obviously, there's a lot of the Adepts, and they have the ability to use that shade to catch up to them, but it's going to be interesting to see the way he tries to do this. Look, he drops the Cyber Core to block the ramp. He doesn't want to use anything that can be sniped, like in just a small shield battery or pylon. And Adepts versus Stalkers is just, it always kind of looks weird to Muslim.
It certainly does, but Drogo's trading out fairly well. And I mean, like, they both microed as well as they could in that situation, but that was really smart by Harstem. So putting down the bigger, chunkier building with more health, so it couldn't just get one shot by the Adepts, because I think that's what Drogo was really hoping for there, that he'd try and throw down like a pylon or the shield battery and boom, it's dead, and then the Adepts are in, and then potentially game's over. But Harstem was a lot smarter than that, and he threw down a chunkier building, and the game goes on.
Yeah, it's so stressful, like the PvP early game, especially because as we know, like so many people go for like proxies and hide their tech, or even just put the random pylons out there just to give you that anxiety, to put that fear into you of what they could be doing. So I feel like there's almost a level of comfort that's added for both players, even if your attack doesn't work, where you're like, oh, okay, well, he was being defensive, which means we're actually going to get to play the next phase of the game, right? And this doesn't necessarily turn into some crazy one base versus one base proxy robo immortal contain garbage that, like, you know, just makes everybody have like heart attacks. So blink coming up for both players, extremely normal to have this +1 attack. And third, Nexus for both of them. So feeling confident on either side, it seems.
They are mirroring each other in a lot of ways. Like the tech route for both of them is the same. I know the units at the start were very different, and that's kind of just how PvP can go. But both going for Blink afterwards was interesting, because Drogo, he's just behind on the Stalker count. I know he has these Adepts that if they do get into a mineral line, then you're really going to feel it. But, they're going to be caught out here, and this is definitely a nice little win for Harstem, getting rid of these bad boys. Yeah,
that's really, really nice. I mean, it's like the weird side effect that having almost any Adept on your opponent has is that you kind of have to always be worried of them just shading past your army if you're not looking, right? Because then the next thing you know, it's like, I can blink my Stalkers and try to catch it. But then by that time, you've lost like 6 or 7 probes. And even in that early game, trying to trade the Adepts versus Stalkers, like Stalkers are worth twice as much gas. Like they are more expensive. So all of that pressure, everything has to be, you have to give a lot of respect to that unit at the beginning of the game. But the follow-up here looks to be about the standard that, a lot of people expect. Is a Charge Lot, Immortal, Archon. I'm not entirely sure if Drogo is just going into gates though with his charge and +1. He's not adding that. If I'm not blind, right? Yeah, no Templar Archives for him here yet.
No, not yet. I mean, so he is ahead in upgrades. Like his +2 is on the way, whereas Harstem, like he's not very far along his +1 at all, and that is potentially some like trading could go on early on. They have just both been kind of volleying hallucinations at one another, just making sure that nobody is kind of doing something crazy against the other, and they're both around the same supply. So I love the amount of respect that goes into PvP when it gets to this stage, and just both just trying to keep the other one honest. Drogo could be very aggressive with this.
Yeah, he gets 2 Adepts into the natural while he's warping in a massive round of units in the front of Harstem's third base. There's at least 1 shield battery there. He has the Observer for vision though. He killed Harstem's Observer earlier out on the map. So the high ground is not going to be a factor in this game for him. And this is where things get tricky too, because he's got that charge, that +2 attack that you were talking about is going to be done eventually. And that's going to open up the floodgates for these Zealots to get even more damage in too.
Certainly is. Harstem had to defensive warp into his main, and Drogo's using this opportunity just to get into the natural of Harstem. This is a pretty close fight. Just pure gateway units. Pounces on the Immortal as well. Does take it out, and Harstem, he goes to that shield battery overcharge, which is darn good, but Drogo realizes the power, starts stepping away, and he's doing nothing but warping in Zealots and Stalkers right now.
Yeah, it's just a 14-second timer on that, so he pulls back, gets another warp in going, brings in a few more Zealots to help tank those hits so that his Stalker count can continue to get the damage done. Probes are going to be pulled by Harstem, trying to push back Drogo in this attack, but losing 6 probes right now already. None of them are mining, right? So just economically speaking, Drogo is going to be able to put out a little bit more over the next minute or so, and he may try to drive the nail in through the heart of Harstem's defense. Not being able to actually get those Archons out means that Drogo doesn't need his own Archons, because he can just overwhelm him with the Zealots and then use those Blink Stalkers, use his Blink Stalker micro to get the damage done behind it.
How many waves can Drogo go, though, before this becomes, not strong enough? Like, he's done a really good job of just making sure that the Immortal count stays low, the Archon count stays low, but this was nice. They both tried to focus a unit and both tried to blink at the last second, but both did the exact same thing, meaning it didn't work out for either one of them. But Harstem's doing a good job of just maintaining composure, just getting together some beefy, stocky units. And Drogo, he is going on to that next stage of the game, being the Templar Archives for Archons. Oh, and Dark Shrine?
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting call. Going for +3 attack as well this early. I'm a little bit surprised it didn't try to use the Zealots more with this type of attack while there were no Archons. I feel like when you go for this many Stalkers, at least it's a little bit harder for them all to shoot at once with the way that they clump up in that large numbers, but it will give him at least this like kind of map control to try and shepherd any units away from going out onto the field with this many Blink Stalkers.
This game is going to a very, very uncomfortable place. Like, we have Robo Bay, a second Robo facility for Drogo, Dark Shrines for both of them, +3 on the way for Drogo. Harstem's got a little bit of a supply lead, but it's a little bit deceiving given how much tech Drogo's delving into here. Like, it's definitely still close between these guys, and I'm not even sure who I feel it's better for right now.
Yeah, it's a very awkward situation in general. I think uncomfortable place is probably the best way that you could have described the direction that this this game kind of went. We have the robotics bay too for Drogo, so maybe that's why we haven't been seeing as many of the zealots, because maybe he. Okay, nope, it's 2 Colossi. Never mind. Just throw everything I was thinking out the window, Ben. I wasn't sure if he was going to try and. I'm like, is he? I thought he was going to try and do some like Blink Stalker Disruptor. I'm like, all right, bring it back to LOTV launch. Let's see it. Let's see it. But instead, he's going for an army that's. Well, I don't know that I've seen a Protoss player try to use a bunch of Colossi in PvP since the Laser Wars, right? There was like that one patch where we had War of the Worlds meta, but I think that was just Wings of Liberty.
Yeah, it was a super long time ago. Like,
it's 8 years ago, man.
Yeah, like Protoss has felt for a long time. They've been like, yeah, you just go Mortal Archon and like jobs are good. But this kind of skipping out that phase entirely, going for the aggression first and being like leapfrog and just skipping out Immortals and just going for Colossus. I like it, but that's a cute surround.
That's a cute blink. Yeah, just get the surround. It's like, yeah, I'll sack a Stalker to keep you by the Photon Cannon. And that's where Fear Dragon comes in. He's like, that's why you got to get DT Blink, man. You just jump out.
I'm curious, though. Like, okay, so Harstem's getting his own Robo Bay and his second Robo facility. Is he just going to go for Disruptors to then try and counter the Colossi? It does look like that's what he's going for, but does he know that he's against Colossi right now? That's the big question. He has been very good about scouting, and now he knows.
Oh, he pops that battery overcharge pretty fast. Now, Harstem also has DTs going for a backstab while he pulls this army away. So I think his hope is to pull like an F2, get some of those units going out without the Observer. Now, there is a Photon Cannon in that natural that we just got to see, at least to try and defend against that Dark Templar. But he is chasing the army, and he's got a pretty damn big one at that Demuslim. But the probes at that third base, or the fourth, excuse me, getting ravaged.
They certainly are. Their DTs are in a lot of spots for Harstem, but this is 4 Colossus. Disruptor in a dream, though, gets sniped by a nice blink by Drogo on top of the Disruptor. Cost him a lot of Stalkers, but it was worth not losing his entire army for. Harstem warps in a lot of Zealots, but these Colossi absolutely massacring everything. And Harstem, his supply is vanishing. Yes,
oh my God.
He's taken out the 4th base of Drogo. But, oh no, he's not actually. Just a lot of probes going down, but Drogo in a commanding lead right now.
Wow. Drogo showing up big time here. 4 DTs for desperation, warped in for the defense here. Those Stalkers blinking forward actually get ripped to pieces by the Dark Templar. So Harstem throwing a little bit of a Hail Mary up, and it is going to buy him time, pushing the army away from his base. I got to say, this definitely could have been the ending moment for him. It still might be if an Observer shows up in time, but at least those Dark Templar have given him a little bit of a buffer.
For a second there, I was like, man, those Dark Templars had blink, but no, the Colossi just did a lot of damn damage to them, and Drogo, again, just being so aggressive with the Stalkers, getting the nice snipes on the Disruptors. That's a nice hit by that lone Disruptor, but it doesn't look like it's going to be enough. Another Disruptor trying to get a shot off, but Harstem, GG's out. Drogo takes a very aggressive game 1.
And extremely well played. I mean, that was like, as somebody who, you know, as just a caster, right? And I get to cast PvPs. I see a lot of people playing these matches in Europe, especially. Don't see people doing that. It kind of goes against some of like the conventions that you think about where the Stalkers kind of fall off later on. But what actually ended up happening was he just used it to snowball into this crazy dark, like, oh my goodness, the Dark Templar, and then going into the Colossi and building this kind of unexpected army. And then you're reminded that, yeah, Colossi are actually pretty good against light units, and all those Zealots that he had in his army just didn't really end up being all that useful.
No, it was super cool. Like, we were kind of not confused, but we were just watching it and being like, okay, this makes sense from Drogo. Like, if you keep the Immortal count low and the Archons low, your army's going to be pretty decent. He had an upgrade lead. And then it was like, okay, he's going into a Robo Bay, second Robo facility. He's getting lots of Stalkers. It's going to be Disruptors, right? Wrong. I'm going to go now into Charge Lot, Thermal Lance. I liked the thought process by him, because obviously these Protoss players are pretty darn evenly matched, but they went down very different tech routes and just approached the game in a totally different way, which collided magnificently in Drogo's favor.
Yeah, it was a fun game to watch. Like, I'm so used to seeing like the Immortal Charge Lot Archon trying to get the spreads, get a Prism in, backstab while you're doing it, but instead we got to see something that actually looked really unique and interesting, like two completely different types of armies going up against each other. And I really like how both players use the DTs too. Like, you know, that Hail Mary DT play warping in 4 at the end for Harstem, it could have worked. You know, there are a lot of games for a lot of players where that is the move if you can kill the observer while they're pushing across, but there's not enough. And we'll see if Drogo brings anything else this outside the norm, I guess, going into the next match.
I've just been thinking, like, just to myself, given that we're playing on new maps and stuff, I wonder if the Colossus decision had anything to do with the chokiness of that map. For example, like, you can defend up all these ramps, and like it's hard to get surrounds on, it's hard to bust up them. So I wonder if that came into Drogo's decision making at all. Anyhow, spawning in the bottom left, playing for Team Liquid, it is Harstem.
And his opponent in the Northeast, leading the series 1-0, he is PtitDrogo.
That intro definitely had quite some funk behind it. By the way, look at this. I think Harstem was getting ready. Yeah, he was getting ready to do a Nexus first. And Drogo, whatever like made him go for such an early probe scout here, he was like, yeah, I'm gonna do it. I know you. I know that you're a cheeky guy that can do this kind of stuff because you're a macro toss. And he goes immediately there, blocks this Nexus first attempt, and Harstem is now kind of in a position where he's like, oh, darn, my gateway's later. I've been spotted. And is Drogo going to go for his own Nexus here?
Oh, yeah. I think he's trying to clap back. He does drop the pylon again, so it's going to delay just a smidge. But, I mean, he should have that Nexus way earlier than Harstem now because of that. And I'm very interested to see how Harstem's going to try and respond to this, right? With you get the cyber cores, presumably second gateway, go first, try to do something aggressive. Was he able to get a probe out on the map to scout? No. So he doesn't even really realize that Drogo has used this opportunity to be insanely greedy himself.
Yes, I really like this response by Drogo. Harstem kind of faking that he's going out there. Like, he was looking for a proxy of some sort, but then coming back and being like, okay, I'm going to put down the Nexus now. So this, ladies and gentlemen, is a PvP where they've both gone for one gateway expand. Not necessarily planned, because Harstem wanted to go Nexus first, and I think Drogo wanted to go 2 gateway. But this is where we've come, and I don't think either player is super comfortable about this situation, but it's beautiful to see that they're playing really against one another and not just able to do whatever they want.
Yeah, I really like that. I think this matchup is just so good because we don't get to see, like, you know, when you think about a lot of games of StarCraft, like a ladder game, it's oftentimes like 2 people who don't really know anything about each other, or maybe they play a couple times, but they kind of have like preset ideas of how they want the game to go in the beginning, like how they want their builds to play out versus, like, you know, the possible options that they're comfortable against. But like when you have a guy like Harstem going up against a guy like Drogo, where they both really think a lot about the game and try to do interesting or quirky stuff, it becomes less about like what's good in PvP and more about how do I just deal with whatever the other guy's trying to do, and how do I mind game around the fact that he's trying to mind game me. And it kind of, you know, it evolves just a little bit past the standard. And I think that's why that first game was so interesting. And already the start of this game has just been, you know, highly unorthodox for PvP.
And it will continue to be that way. They're both going for Twilight Council, but everything from this point forward is just kind of like unknown territory. And I feel kind of for the both of them as well, because nothing worked out the way that Harstem wanted it to. His gateway was late. He's going for a hallucinated oracle here. So we'll see what this gets done. Obviously, it just wants to scout and kind of make Drogo panic a little bit, but he's already got shield batteries up in his like main, and now he's moving up to his natural. He's like, okay, it's a hallucination. I don't have to worry about that. But he does also have to find out what Harstem's up to on the other side of the map.
And speaking of Drogo, hallucinated Phoenix making its way across. So using that timing very well off the Sentry energy to be able to get that scout. Probably my favorite change, honestly, of all the things they've done to PvP over the years. One of my favorite things is just being able to get that hallucination out so early to scout to try and reduce the volatility of this matchup. Although there are many builds that hit where if you go for an early Sentry, you're not going to necessarily have what you need to defend, but it is something. We do have a probe with a little pylon in the bottom right corner to Muslim.
We do. Now, is this for hiding a certain tech, maybe a gateway for having a different point of warp in that.
Oh.
And it is a dark shrine for Harstem, so wanting to really send this game out of left field with something really, really awkward and bonkers actually now. Drogo's going for the far more standard approach, getting like the Forge, getting the upgrades, getting the Robo as well with this, and third base.
All right, so let's see then what exactly he's able to get done with that. I always love seeing this type of stuff. The potential to instantly get that game win if your opponent, misreads or doesn't really take the precautions necessary against that type of attack can be absolutely devastating. As Drogo is going to try and get on the map now with his Stalkers. Hallucinated Phoenix sees that third base, says, oh, well, yours is a little bit further along than mine. So maybe he's going to feel a little bit of pressure to do something about that. We will have to see his own third base. He's got to be ready to defend against these Stalkers, though. There's quite a few coming in.
There is, and he does have quite a lot of his own, actually. Drogo trying to go for a pylon here, but in exchange for a Stalker, in fact, 2 Stalkers for 1 now, definitely not a good start for Drogo. And Harstem back at home, he's getting the Robo Bay, and he's getting a lot more Stalkers. So this game, I think we can maybe confidently say, in fact, no, not confidently, these guys can really change it up a lot, but he's going to go for Stalker Disruptor here, a very, very volatile army composition, but he's going to start things off with the DTs. They are being warped in now.
Yeah, let's see it. Let's see what Harstem can do with those. I really like the way he engaged, by the way, those Stalkers, because I think Drogo was trying to be really cute with his blink backs that he was queuing up, but Harstem definitely chipped off a few more than I thought he would. So Drogo, now we talk about this map in particular, Pillars of Gold. You have some wide open angles. It's a low ground third base. It's not as simple as park a couple units on top of a ramp and land your force fields. You're going to have to really be careful about where you're positioning yourself because there's a lot of angles to go in and a lot of angles to run away through.
This DT is either the unluckiest DT it feels like. I don't know if that was like just some 6-star sense by Drogo, but just maneuvering around. And now he knows that he's actually against DTs as well without receiving any damage. But, or did he? Did he not see it? Because that is one.
Did he actually see it?
Yeah, it could have been one of the...
Maybe it was bad. Maybe it was bad to kill it on accident like that. I don't know. Now the Dark Templar is in the natural mineral line. And he's hacking and whacking and smacking some probes down, 5+ already killed. And of course, he can continue to get more. Stalkers are going to be warped in. But is an observer nearby enough to actually kill this in time? He's taking a ton of damage from this.
Oh my gosh. The first DT gets spotted, gets killed. I don't think he even realized that he did kill it. And now the second DT getting 9 probes single-handedly. Harstem just handed himself a nice little lead in this game, at least economically.
Yeah, well, that's about as much as you can ask for, really. Hero Dark Templar, he even gets a cancel there on that photon cannon. He's going to kill a couple more probes. I don't know that this DT would get away. I think it's faster than the Observer, Nate. What are you saying? There's no scans, bro. Oh! Well, there's that.
I thought for a second he was also going to lift up the Stalker with the Warp Prism, but that'd have been too much. But that was a great surround with the Blink Stalkers. Now he's had to invest in cannons in each one of his mineral lines because the DTs, like the follow-up. And back at Harstem's home, he's got his own disruptors out. Like, his army's better tech, it seems, as well. He certainly does, and he's in the natural of his opponent here, and that is a lot of Stalkers just murdering all the probes. 23, 24 probes falling. The Warp Prism does get sniped by Harstem, so that was nice, but is it too much damage? And it is! Wow, guys, we'll